We're How's it going, fam? What's going on? Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com. Chris, if you could bring up the tweet. This is from Chris Lowe of ESPN. Pete Golding is leaving Alabama to take the defensive coordinator position at Ole Miss. That'll be linking up with Lane Kiffin, another former assistant at Alabama, who is now a head coach at Ole Miss. So you have Lane Kiffin working with Pete Golding. This news is just in. I want to get your take inside the comment box. Again, Pete Golding is leaving Alabama. News coming in from Chris Lowe. And the thing about Chris Lowe is he has the hotline to Nick Saban's office, right? If anyone is going to break news in this market regarding Alabama football, it's going to be Chris Lowe. So don't think you're going to get duped on this, because Chris Lowe is as well connected, probably the most connected out of anybody in the industry when it comes to Alabama football. Nick Saban trusts Chris Lowe. So you know this came directly from Chris Lowe to Nick Saban. Nick Saban gave the approval to get this news out. So here's the tweet. I want to get your take inside the comment box. Again, Pete Golding is leaving Alabama for Ole Miss. If we can get that added on the bottom, Chris, I'd appreciate that. What is your take? Give me an emoji. How do you guys feel about this? What do you think it's going to mean for Alabama football going forward in terms of who could potentially be the next defensive coordinator at Alabama, right? Who do you look for? Who are potential defensive coordinator targets? And I know you guys are still waiting on a potential another coaching change at the offensive coordinator position. And as we've discussed before, Bill O'Brien's contract is not up until February of some time. So this is the tweet from Chris Lowe. This is coming in. This is all breaking news. We just came in. I was asking some of our guys to jump on with me as well. Hopefully Jimmy Stein or someone can jump on with me, and we can kind of have some chit chat back and forth. But Pete Golding is leaving Alabama football to replace Chris Partridge, the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, as sources tell ESPN. The source, again, you know it 100% is Nick Saban, because he's verified that. Golding has been with Nick Saban at Alabama since 2018, the last 4 seasons as the defensive coordinator. You look at Alabama's defense and you look at Alabama's offense throughout the last 5 years and how each have changed, right? And I think it's kind of evolved with the game of college football, but there's been a lot of people that just have not been impressed, satisfied, happy about Pete Golding. And there's been so much blame to go on the defense for the lack of overall success at Alabama. You look to all the tools that Alabama had this past year, especially in the secondary. You have William Anderson, probably the best defensive player in the entire country. And you have Dallas Turner on the opposite edge, right? And you cannot still bring home the natty. And I think a lot of people point to the defense, and you still point to the offense too, because you have Bryce Young, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and kind of the lack of weapons or the lack of design that the offense had. So this is monumental news. This is news that people have wanted for a long time. And look, I mean, you see the comments coming in. Chris, you could throw up some of the comments from some of our viewers right here about Pete Golding leaving the University of Alabama. And I think sometimes when your offensive coordinator or your defensive coordinator leave during this timing, and I know that signing day is before, is now in December, but sometimes it does have an impact on the team going in. But I think particularly in this case, there's a lot of people that are going to be excited around the program. What's up, Michael? I see you inside the comment box. Appreciate you. That are excited about this change. 2023 starts out with Pete Golding leaving Alabama. And I think when you look to Alabama's defense, and we've talked about that a little bit, coming back to this 2023 year, there are still a lot of guys that, return with a lot of experience, right? I mean, you just saw yesterday, we had Clint and Jimmy Stein talking about the Alabama defensive secondary. You got Kool-Aid, you got Terran Arnold, you got some very intricate pieces coming back to this season. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of that defense and how they evolve and who steps up in place of William Anderson, right? I think it's clearly going to be Dallas Turner. Deontay Lawson, I think, is a shining star, the inside linebacker position. So you kind of look to guys who are coming back. You all saw that Jaheim Otis on Twitter recently said that he's coming back. So again, thank you for joining us. Hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. We appreciate you guys for being here. It's really important that you guys hit the thumbs up and that you guys subscribe. We really appreciate you guys joining us right here on Bama Insider to talk about Pete Golding. And let me see if I can get Bone on here. Yeah, just get your thoughts inside the comment box, and I would appreciate this if you guys could put up your potential defensive coordinator for Alabama. I know Raw is already in the comment box talking about the offensive coordinator. He's saying Kingsbury, right, Chris, for the offensive coordinator. But on the defensive coordinator, who do you think you guys? Who would you like to see as Alabama's next defensive coordinator going forward? And who are some potential targets? And of course, our staff at Bama Insider on 3 will have those targets. And a lot of people have been calling for Jeremy Pruitt. Look, Jeremy Pruitt. Let me ask you something, because so the last time that Jeremy Pruitt was here at Alabama, and since this kind of transformation of Alabama's offense, we've seen college football in essence change, right? We've seen more points get put on the board, and Saban has evolved from the offensive standpoint, but do you still feel that Alabama defense could still allow that 10-point window, right? I think the fans, like, they see 17 points, they see 21 points. They don't want that. They want perfection in all phases of the game. I love kind of that clip that we had when Saban was talking about just physically getting back to tackling. It was as simple as that. And we had some good B-roll footage of Saban literally working with the DBs and tackling. And, sometimes it comes down to the fundamentals. I mean, if you ever heard Pete Golding speak, right? We had an opportunity to talk to him before media day or during media day and then for the bowl season. Pete Golding, an incredible mind from a defensive mindset. But sometimes I think a lot of the feedback that I would get from you guys and that we would hear is that Pete Golding kept things too complicated for the defense. Right. I mean, there was sometimes if you watch the inside linebackers that he would just be going on and on and on. The linebackers would just be standing there without even getting reps. And there was a couple former players that said when Alabama was really running through on the defensive side that they only ran like 2 or 3 plays. Right. Someone calling for Bo Davis. Bo Davis is one of the names that, everybody has asked about. But this name right here, put up D'Amico Ryans. Okay. I don't know. Look, the San Francisco 49ers and then to Alabama, look, I think D'Amico Ryans on his way to probably a head coaching spot, but I think a lot of people would see D'Amico Ryans come home, right? Hey, Chris, could you send Jimmy the link? Jimmy's available to come on. Oh, he did. All right. Yeah, I followed the 49ers. I mean, D'Amico Ryans. I mean, the 49ers defense is the reason that the 49ers probably make a run to the Super Bowl. And we got Jimmy Stein coming in. Jimmy, what's up, man? It looks like you're in heaven.
Boy.
Yeah. So
I guess that's a promotion from where I was.
Okay, Jimmy. So the news is finally out. The news is finally out. Pete Golding leaving Alabama. People are celebrating. Champagne is being popped around. Okay, let's look at this from from what it is. I mean, let's talk about the good, the potential bad, and your initial take with Pete Golding headed to Ole Miss.
Well, first of all that matters to Alabama is that there's a vacancy now at defensive coordinator and inside linebacker, and Alabama's going to have to fill that. And as we know, Nick Saban doesn't move super fast with that in the sense that making the best decision is what matters. He'll interview a lot of people, talk to a lot of people. So that's first and foremost. Okay, now there's a vacancy. Can you get better is the question. Can you upgrade from Pete Golding? I believe so. I've never felt that Pete Golding was elite. I thought he was good. I thought he was over criticized, frankly, because I think the level of criticism sort of rose to the point that he must have been, real horrible. That was never the case. As a matter of fact, I'll look back and recently posted on the Talk of Champions board, Kyle, that since Pete Golding was hired in 2019, only 5 teams in college football have given up more points than Alabama. I mean, so over a 4-year period, obviously the numbers are pretty good. The problem was here's what was good about Pete and bad at the same time. The numbers are fine. We just went over Alabama clearly, per any statistic you want to look at, Kyle, Alabama was the second best defense in the SEC. Only Georgia had a better defense over 12 games than Alabama in terms of scoring, in terms of yards, in terms of efficiency. It's Georgia 1 and Alabama 2, and probably third was Kentucky. And Alabama's just better than Kentucky on defense. Now, that sounds pretty good. But the thing is, it's Alabama, Kyle. Yeah. It's not good enough. And I think that's how I would best define or describe the Pete Golding era. Like I said, sixth, I think, in terms of points given up over 4 years, second best defense this year. It was good. He's good. He's a good coach. That's why Ole Miss wants him. Lane Kiffin's no fool. This is why Ole Miss fired who they had. They believe they're upgrading too, and they probably are. Pete Golding was good. Was he good enough? No, I don't believe so. And I think this is an excellent opportunity for Alabama to upgrade, and I think they can.
Here with Jimmy Stein of Bama Insider. Remember, we'll have full coverage back on Bama Insider. Pete Golding leaving the University of Alabama as defensive coordinator, head to Ole Miss to pair up with Lane Kiffin, and that's going to be interesting for Ole Miss fans to be talking about. And as Jimmy just said, Ole Miss feels like they are upgrading, right? But when you're at Alabama, I think we knew that this was eventually going to come. We thought it was going to come maybe the last 2 years. And Jimmy, I think when you kind of dive into the numbers, Chris, if you have some graphics to work with there on the back end, when you look at Pete Golding and the career that he had and kind of the guys that were under him, and you just mentioned this, and I'm really curious to get, I know you haven't even had time, maybe you have, to build somewhat of a hot board, but what are some realistic names when you kind of look to Alabama's defensive coordinator, when you kind of look to the past? Because Saban has had Pete under his wing for quite some time. There's some names that people want. Clearly, everyone is calling for Jeremy Pruitt. Maybe let's start there. Is that even a realistic possibility? Is he done from his entanglement with any sort of NCAA infractions that he had? I mean, where did he stand with some realistic choices as of now? And I know that you haven't even had time to really process this because it's just happened, but let's kind of start some dialogue there.
Sure. I think there's three names that jump off to me in terms of like obvious names that will be discussed in the building. I'm very comfortable saying these names are going to come up in the Mal Moore building today, if they hadn't been coming up prior to today, because rarely do these things, land from out the universe. I mean, I think Alabama sort of knew this was coming to a degree anyway. But here's the three names to me that stand out to me, and I'm sure we will come up with others, Kyle. But number one's Jeremy Pruitt. You asked, is it realistic? Is that Tennessee stuff behind him? And I think there's several levels to this. But number one is, yes, you can hire Jeremy Pruitt. He is hireable. There is no SEC rule. There's no NCAA rule. There is nothing that prevents Alabama from hiring Jeremy Pruitt. But, I used to be a lawyer before I was full-time writing for Bama Insider. And I would have this conversation with my clients all the time, Kyle. And that's, I would be asked often, can I do this? And I would explain to a lot of people, yes, you can. You can. I'm not telling you you cannot do this. But let's talk about whether you should do this. And that's, I think, the situation with Jeremy. I think Alabama can hire Pruitt, and it might be the right thing to do or the smart thing to do. They just know going in that down the road, there could be ramifications. And what are those ramifications? Are you looking at a suspension? Are you looking at the fact he may be barred from recruiting? Or are you going to live with whatever the consequences are when you don't know what they will be? So what I think Alabama has to do is a ton of work on the front end. What are the ramifications here of hiring Jeremy Pruitt? What are we looking at in the event there are sanctions against Tennessee and sanctions against Jeremy Pruitt? We don't know that. That might not happen till this spring, might not happen till this summer. And we all know how the NCAA moves, might not happen to the end of this year. So there are some unknowns there that no doubt will make Nick Saban and Alabama a little nervous. But can they hire Jeremy Pruitt? Will they hire him knowing that ramifications are on the way, sanctions are on the way, most likely? I do think it's a very real possibility, but it has to give you pause. The second and third names have no such NCAA issues. It's just a matter of, can you hire them? Because they're guys currently in the NFL or about to be in the NFL. One is Jim Leonard, the Wisconsin defensive coordinator. Outstanding track record at Wisconsin. I mean, his consistency since becoming their defensive coordinator is amazing. I believe off the top of my head, Kyle, and I can't spit his resume out off the top of my head, but off the top of my head, Kyle, I think he had 6 seasons maybe at Wisconsin defensive coordinator, 5 of the 6, Wisconsin was a top 10 defense national. 5 of the 6. That's incredible, particularly when you throw in the fact that he's young. He's new. He went from the NFL in 2014 to a college position coach in 15 and 16, and then a DC in 17. So 2 years after leaving the National Football League as a player, he's already a coordinator in the Big Ten.
Yep.
And then, like I said, and was the Broyles Award winner his first year as defensive coordinator. Just an outstanding track record. The problem with Jim Leonhard, there's 2, Kyle. One is he wants to coach in the NFL, and he is on the short list of a few NFL teams.
Well, isn't Alabama an NFL team? They're like the 33rd, I mean, this is the next team.
That's exactly right. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I've said that before, the 33rd NFL team. But Jim Leonhard is perhaps even the leading candidate for the Cleveland Browns. So I'm not sure that Jim Leonhard is hireable, but he's worth the call. Second minor problem is he's never worked for Nick Saban, and Saban's defensive hires have been guys that have worked in Saban's system. Leonhard does not come from the Saban system, but he is probably, if you had a vote of all college coaches, he would probably be considered the best defensive coordinator in college football, to be honest. A third name I'll throw out real quickly because it makes sense, and this guy does have a lot of experience in the Nick Saban system and is currently in the NFL, and that is Carl Scott, former Alabama defensive back, now defensive backfield coach, I think in Seattle. And if Carl Scott, again, no DC experience, but man, when you coach in the NFL, Kyle, it is a crash course in X's and O's. It's a crash course in learning coverages and calls. So I would say for a first-time DC, Carl Scott would have a lot under him. The years with Saban, couple years in the NFL, great recruiter. So those are the 3 names that jump out to me: Jeremy Pruitt, Jim Leonhard, and Carl Scott. But by no means will those be the only 3 considered. And I'm eager myself to hear other names, hear what's going on inside the building, and just hear general opinions from our subscribers at Bama Insider and other people in the industry and the media. What names, do you guys think? But those are the 3 that jump out to me.
Jimmy, we're here with Jimmy Stein of Bama Insider. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Pete Golding out at Alabama, taking a job with Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. Go to Bama Insider, the website. Read all the great content from our staff at Bama Insider, coming to you on January 13th. And we're talking about potential candidates. Make sure and like and subscribe. People, Jimmy, look, I follow me and Caden and my son, 14 years old. We watch every 49ers game together. People calling for D'Amico Ryans to come back home. It doesn't seem realistic. But he clearly is a name who's done an amazing job. I clearly think he's probably the reason the 49ers still make a run at the Super Bowl, even with the 3rd string quarterback. But that's not realistic, right?
No. I can't imagine that it is for a few reasons. But here's the first. Let me give you about the first 7 million reasons. And that's D'Amico. If not this cycle, D'Amico is a slam dunk to be an NFL head coach soon. It may not be this upcoming season, but it would be no later than the next season. And being an NFL head coach, you're talking about $6, $7, $8 million a year. Being DC at Alabama is $2 million max. So it's just the money alone, it doesn't make sense. Secondly, no experience in college. While I think D'Amico has earned the right to coach in college with 0 experience, it is still a thing, in terms of he's never recruited, know all the rules, got to pass a test before you can even work in college. I don't know that he has any, inkling of wanting to sit down and study a rule book. I just think D'Amico is on an NFL track. I would say this, Kyle, as we all know, being an NFL head coach, for most folks, doesn't tend to last very long. Right now, I would bet a serious amount of money that one day D'Amico Ryans will be either Alabama's defensive coordinator or head coach. I think I would take that bet. I bet he is one day. I just don't think the timing is right this time around.
Here with Jimmy Stein, a Bama insider. The news is out. Pete Golding is headed out of Tuscaloosa. He's going to Oxford, Mississippi, where he will coach with Lane Kiffin, another former coach who coached under Nick Saban. We start to see Nick Saban's the coaching tree is unbelievable, right? It's like Bama in the NFL, and then you look to all the coaches that are coaching now in different places under Nick Saban's coaching tree. Of course, he's the GOAT, and it's not that surprising. But Pete Golding out now. Jimmy, while we're here for a little bit longer, I mean, did you see this coming right after this season? Did you think it was going to happen last season? Was there a particular was it on the recruiting trail? Was it just simply defensive schematics that you knew this was eventually going to happen? Was it time? Did because usually how this happens is Nick Saban helps these guys kind of find a landing spot. I mean, it's rare that Coach Saban, from my knowledge, just fires guys without having something set up. But did you foresee this particular happening at this time following the Sugar Bowl after Kansas State?
Yes and no, Colin. By that, I'm trying not to be too vague. I got to be a little vague. I wasn't surprised, but I was not surprised at all when it happened. Nor was I telling people, hey, this is going to happen. You cannot be surprised while at the same time.
And the reason I ask you that is because we've been doing this for the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for me, Kyle, and I bet for Pete too. This is just my sense of things. I'm going out on a limb here, but this is my sense of things, and I'm sort of speaking and thinking for Pete Golding. I think after the Tennessee game this October, I think at that point, Pete himself, I think probably felt like, they're going to get someone else, they're going to get someone else. And I would guess mid-season on, while he was still working, of course, 25 hours a day for Alabama, trying to get Alabama better. And Alabama did play well down the stretch, frankly. I think the idea that he was going to be coaching somewhere else was something he may have even assumed, halfway or more through this season. So he's looking for that landing spot.
Yeah.
Nick Saban, much people don't realize Nick is always looking to upgrade. Always. It doesn't, if Alabama had finished this season with everybody going, you know what? That Pete Golding did pretty good this year. Nick Saban's still looking to upgrade if there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think it's win-win for everybody in terms of Coach Golding does land in a nice spot with a good job in the same league and a good program. And it's an opportunity for Nick Saban to upgrade. I know everybody would love to know every detail of every meeting, and did he get fired, and did he quit, and what was that like? I think a lot of things can be true at the same time. But I think in terms of if there's ever been a mutual thing where everybody wins, this is probably that situation. And all that really matters to Alabama fans should be this: hey, who's the next guy? Who is Alabama going to upgrade? And I'm optimistic that that's going to happen. I think we'll know from the hire, frankly, in terms of did Nick Saban get his guy.
Here with Jimmy Stein, a Bama insider. Pete Golding out at Alabama as defensive coordinator, headed to Ole Miss. You can read about it back on Bama Insider. Of course, we'll have a whole defensive coordinator hot board posted probably soon on Bama Insider. Jimmy, before I let you go, I want to quickly look at whoever's the defensive coordinator is coming in. Let's quickly talk about Alabama's defense and the players that this new defensive coordinator is going to have to work with, because you lose William Anderson, you lose a lot of guys from the secondary, but of course Alabama, as we know, tons of guys coming back, a lot of excitement in that secondary, some new linebackers that should be phenomenal. Kind of give us a rundown of that defense and when the incoming defensive coordinator, what he's going to have to work with as we enter the fourth quarter program, which starts here at the end of the month here in January, and then closer to spring football, March and April.
Yeah. You will hear the term from some people of, rebuild, because there's going to be so many new faces. And that is true. There will be new faces, but I don't like that rebuild term at all. I don't even really like reload. And this is why, Kyle, Alabama returns a ton of guys who played with the first team last year. It's going to be barren in a spot or two, but there are 6 defensive linemen returning who played significant snaps with the first team. And Jamil Burrows, Damon Payne, Jamarian Latham, to go along returning starters like Tim Smith and Jaheim Otis and Justin Aboigbe, who basically hinted this week he's back. So that's 6 defensive linemen who have played first-team snaps. Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner have played a ton of first-team snaps at outside linebacker. Deontay Lawson returns inside. He's played a lot with the first team. And in the secondary, where you've had a lot of losses, Kool-Aid McKinstry is a returning starter. Terrion Arnold started games. Malachi Moore's been starting games going now into his 4th season. That's 3 guys.
Yep.
Now, you'd like to have more. But I'm just saying, Kyle, with that many guys returning, I just named 10. 6 defensive linemen, 3 – wait, whatever. No, more than 10. 6 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 3 DBs. That's 12. So that's 12 guys who have played first team. So I don't look at that as a rebuild reload. Now, I left out some positions. I didn't mention a real safety, didn't mention an inside linebacker along with Deontay Lawson. So you are going to have to plug in some new dudes. But overall, this is a pretty experienced group coming back on defense.
Here with Jimmy Stein of Bama Insider. Pete Golding out as a defensive coordinator. He is headed to Ole Miss. We're going to let Jimmy go, and we're going to bring on our boy Andrew Bone for another take from the recruiting standpoint. And of course, Andrew knows a ton about Alabama football. So does Jimmy. Jimmy, I love the setup, man. I think you're in Tuscaloosa, so you know what that means, man. We got to get together. And, you know, I don't know. Chris in the back end, you know, is our guy. So we'll get together. We're building up our Tuscaloosa crew, but we'll let you go. We're going to continue to talk about Pete Golding out. Thank you so much for joining us, Jimmy. Go check out Jimmy's great work back on Bama Insider.
Thanks, guys.
All right, here with Andrew Bone. Bone, the news is finally out. Pete Golding is headed to Ole Miss to go link up with another former coach. That is Lane Kiffin, who was also here at Alabama as the offensive coordinator. Your initial take, you know, we got 1,000 people on. What was your take? Everyone wants to know, not only from, you know, let's talk team first, and then we'll talk about the recruiting standpoint.
You know, it's been kind of an up and down road with Pete. You know, I guess from a fan standpoint, you know, people have given him a lot of grief on social media, but at the end of the day, you know, smart guy. You know, I think he's, you know, has been at Alabama since 2018. Probably longer than many were expecting. But there was a chance that he was going to go to Ole Miss a couple years ago. You know, Coach Saban just put a stop to that. He ends up sticking around, and I don't think there was really much of a plan to make it work out this time around. And I think once Pete started, the Ole Miss rumors started kind of coming along. I don't think there was anything that was going to really stop it. I think Saban, pretty much, I guess you could say, gave his blessing for it, and a fresh start. And I think there's been some, definitely some conversations potentially with. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if there have been conversations with other potential defense coordinators to this point. I think Saban's obviously got a lot of respect for Pete, but I also think there might be some plans in place for Alabama, and I don't think that Pete Golding leaving necessarily puts Alabama in some sort of bind. I think Nick Saban had a plan, has a plan, and whenever that plan gets put out there, we'll know. But I don't know if we're going to see anything this weekend, but potentially next week. There's a lot that's kind of going on behind the scenes. We've heard some different names that have kind of gone out there that people either want or don't want. But one thing to also keep in mind, there is a safeties position that is open at Alabama now. You have an inside linebacker position plus defense coordinator. So you're trying to bring in at least 2 new coaches on the defensive side of the ball right now. Is Jeremy Pruitt potentially the guy? We don't know. I think a lot of people are just kind of speculating, on that front right now. I think that, there's some guys right now that are playing in the playoffs this weekend in the NFL. And no, I'm not talking about D'Amico Ryans. I think D'Amico's have a lot of really strong opportunities as a potential head coach. But also think that there are potentially some other guys who are out there that might generate some interest, and might even have already shown some interest. Told their agents, "Hey, if Alabama is interested, I might be interested." So we'll see, but I don't think Alabama's going to be worried for too long, and I think they're going to make a great hire. I'm never really worried too much about Nick Saban hiring a great, defense coach or a great coach in general. I mean, it always seems to work out. But from a recruiting perspective, I mean, Pete's been great as a recruiter. Say what you want, about potentially him as a coach, but as a recruiter, I mean, he's done an unbelievable job for Alabama, especially in the state of Louisiana. Has recruited Mississippi well over the last few years. So you're going to have to get somebody in there that has some ties, I believe, to those states, whether that's somebody that's either from those states or has recruited those states in the past, because I think Alabama is going to continue to recruit those areas really strong over the course of the next, obviously the next several years. But we'll see what happens. But I think, I mean, personally, I like Pete, but I think there's probably a lot more Alabama fans that are out there that seem to be a little bit more, I guess, excited about a new face coming in, and potentially some changes. Not potentially, but some changes on the defensive side of the ball, and that's what's going to happen. I think we're still, most likely going to see a change at the offense coordinator position with Bill O'Brien. I see all these people, because this school or that school, they've already announced who they're going to hire. Garrett Riley being, getting the Clemson job the other day as offense coordinator. Everybody's like, oh, well, could have had him, but still have. Bill O'Brien still the offense. That has nothing to do with it at all. Nick Saban could have made a decision, regarding that already. Regardless if Bill O'Brien is still listed as the offensive coordinator, I think they can announce that decision at any time, and I just don't think they're ready. I think they haven't made a decision quite yet on who they want. And going back to Garrett Riley a little bit, I don't think there was ever a conversation. We had talked about him as a potential target maybe a month or so ago, but now we're now we've been hearing that there was never really any conversations between, not really, but not at all any conversations between Garrett Riley and Alabama, and it wasn't because Bill O'Brien's still the offense coordinator. Alabama could have had a conversation with him pretty easily. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And, Nick Saban knows what he's doing. And, you look at what Alabama has to offer, from a coaching standpoint, from, development standpoint, all the bells and whistles, the number one recruiting class in the Saban era that's coming in. A lot of coaches want to be around that. They want to be around that program and continue to, continue to develop their craft as college coaches. So it'll be interesting kind of see who they end up hiring over the course of the next week or two, especially at both coordinator positions. Safety position, do they bring in a guy that's a safeties coach and a defense coordinator, or will it be a safeties, or excuse me, a linebackers coach that's also the defense coordinator? There's a few different ways you can go here, and obviously a lot of different names that have been tossed around, and probably one name more so than anybody on the message boards over the course of the last couple of weeks. But who knows? I'm not too concerned.
Bone, let me ask you this, because I want to pair this up with what we asked Jimmy earlier. Is Jeremy Pruitt, would you say, the best fit? I mean, look at it from two different angles, yes and no, obviously, but like, do you feel that Jeremy Pruitt would be a good fit to come back home to Bama?
Yeah, I mean, with Pruitt, he's definitely a guy that understands and knows what it kind of takes to play at a championship level, practice at a championship level, go through the off season at a championship level, and I think that's something that probably has been missing. Not probably, but it's been missing. I mean, you want those guys that are going to be straight up business, that are going to be they're going to be for your friends, but they're going to be just straight up always on top of you, especially at practice, and making sure that you are developing into the best player and being put into the best position. And Pruitt's certainly one of those guys that understands all that and has been, he knows exactly what Nick Saban wants, and has been incredibly successful throughout the last several years. So he's certainly somebody that I could see coming in. Now, putting everything aside, all the stuff at Tennessee, everybody, concerned about that. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely somebody, if all that stuff's put away, definitely somebody that would fit right into what Coach Saban, what these players need. And so, yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a home run for Alabama. But, you also have to factor in, kind of everything else, and kind of what's happened, and will he, is there nothing else to worry about moving forward? Because you don't want to hire a coach that, all of a sudden, he can't coach, or he can't go out on the road and recruit, for a year or however long it may be. But he's certainly a guy that, we've heard about for a long time, behind the scenes as a, and it may come more so from his side than anything else. He might want to be back in Tuscaloosa as much as possible, and hopefully willing that to. He might be hopefully willing that to happen. But the only person that's going to make the decision is going to be Nick Saban, and we'll hopefully know something pretty soon. They got a junior day this weekend. I wasn't surprised by the timing of Pete Golding, because we have been hearing that a lot. Really over the course of the last week and a half, we've been hearing a lot that Pete was probably going to head elsewhere. And it was all about Ole Miss. I mean, that's the only school we really heard about was Ole Miss, that he was likely going to go there, and Alabama wasn't really going to do anything to prevent that from happening. So they have a junior day this weekend. So I knew that if something was going to happen, it was probably going to happen before the weekend started, just so that, kids kind of understand, hey, you don't want to coach there that's going to be, trying to recruit you, and then, in 2 days, they're no longer there. So I talked to Sterling Dixon, who is 2024 linebacker commitment for Alabama. Actually won the Class 3A Lineman of the Year award yesterday. He was recruited by Pruitt. Not Pruitt.
Already.
Pruitt used to have Mobile, so I guess it would be an easy transition for him. But yeah, I mean, he had a really good relationship with Pete Golding. Pete recruited him. It's kind of weird, Charles Kelly was the area recruiter for Mobile, and then Pete Golding was obviously a linebackers coach, defense coordinator, so he had a really good relationship with Pete.
Hold on, Bone. This one's funny. Dennis Franchione's calling for D'Amico Ryan.
Well, I'm glad Coach Fran's coming back in. But anyway, so I talked to Sterling earlier, and he said, I saw the news just kind of like everybody else. He said, it doesn't really change my, my decision at all. I'm still committed to Alabama. That's where I want to go. Other schools are going to continue to recruit him. I'm sure they're going to use that as a, to their advantage. And, there's probably already rumors on different message boards that, I guess the good thing is he's the only defensive commitment, but he's, people are going to probably use that. Oh, because Pete's gone, this kid's, wide open now, but, that's not necessarily the case. I don't think that's necessarily the case with anybody that's normally committed to Alabama. Most of the kids are committing to Alabama, the program. They're committing to Coach Saban. They're not necessarily committing to a coordinator or a position coach, because at Alabama, most of those guys are going to, they're at Alabama for a reason. For coordinators, if you have a lot of success, you're going to be a head coach one day. For position coaches, you have a lot of success, you're going to be a coordinator one day, or potentially a head coach. So, a lot of in the amount of success that Alabama has on a yearly basis, you can pretty much expect, coaching turnover, just about every other year. And so, kids don't really care that much about position coaches or coordinators at Alabama. They care more about, structure of the program in general. Nick Saban. that's pretty much what it's always been about in Tuscaloosa. So long, Pete. It was good knowing you. You done a lot. You did a lot for the program. Helped Alabama win a national title back in 2020, and got there last year, didn't win it, and had a couple of obviously a couple of hiccups this year, but won the Sugar Bowl, and now he's going to go over to Ole Miss and I guess figure things out over there. The good thing about, I'm sure he's excited. I think he was always his number one target in this 2023 recruiting class was Suntarian Perkins, who signed with Ole Miss, and now they get to team up, and they were really close. So I'm sure he's happy about coaching him, but probably it's probably a good thing. Fresh start for everybody. Fresh start for Pete, fresh start for Alabama, fresh start for the fan base, everybody. I think it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
All right, well, there you have it. Pete Golding out as Alabama's defensive coordinator, headed to Ole Miss to link up with Lane Kiffin. You can catch all the news back on Bama Insider. Bone, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Earlier in the show, we had Jimmy Stein of Bama Insider join us. We'll have more complete coverage back on Bama Insider, including a defensive hot board, which will be probably posted, sooner than later. But I'm Kyle Henderson. He's Andrew Bone, coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The news that you've been waiting for is finally here. Pete Golding out at Alabama. Stay tuned for the hot board coming up soon, back on Bama Insider, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll catch up with you soon.